Today's guest is Steve Dixie, founder and CEO of Gateway Integrated Solutions. After serving 20 years in the U.S. Air Force, Steve transitioned into corporate and then entrepreneurship, building a veteran owned firm that specializes in IT staffing and government contracting. He's passionate about creating opportunities for veterans and their families while helping organizations navigate the complex world of proposals and procurement. Steve, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Jessica, for taking the time to have me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to dive into your story because being a fellow military spouse, your mission and your values, especially Air Force,
Mhm.
it aligns well with my background and just hits home for me. So I'm really excited to share your story and to tap into all that you're up to right now. So, would you mind getting us started and just sharing a little bit about you? I know that you did spend 20 years in the Air Force, you retired, you got into corporate America and then also launching your own business. Can you talk us through that process and what led you to start Gateway Integrated Solutions?
Sure, yeah, not a problem. Of course, I'm retired military, spent 20 years, actually 20 years, 22 days in the Air Force. Once I retired, I went kind of like in straight to corporate America, where I worked for several different, Fortune 500 companies. My background is in legal as a paralegal. So in those companies, performed as a senior HR paralegal or just a senior litigation paralegal. So probably after about 15 years of being in corporate America, just going through some downsizing with one of the companies, I was eventually laid off. And from there, I started Gateway Integrated Solutions.
Yeah, that's really great. Thank you so much for sharing. Just curious, what was the turning point that, or what transpired in corporate? I know you had mentioned that you were laid off, but to actually start a business,
Yes.
in the space.
Yeah. So basically, I was working with, one of the Fortune 500 companies, and I had built a program for them, offboarding. I did background screening for a few, for that company as well. And I did a lot of recruiting, which was kind of like out of my wheelhouse, something that I've never done before. But once I looked into it, I thought it was something that I could do. And then once I actually got laid off from that position, then I was like, hey, this is something that I really need to look into and take it seriously. Because I had started the company when I was still working, but it was on a back burner. So it wasn't really, a high priority to me to make it work. But once I got laid off, I had the option of either continue on with that company in another position or just take severance and continue my company. So one of the things I wanted to do was I knew I had the background. I knew how to build a structured team and I understood the nuances of staffing. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take my chance and just, start my own company and go from there. And so that's how Gateway got formed. Me just taking a chance on myself.
Yeah, that's really great. I love that this was actually, you were actually started building this while you were still employed and it was on the side a little bit. So you had that entrepreneurial thinking, that hat on, and it just took a life event for you to be able to pursue it. And I believe everything happens for a reason. And I think that this was likely your purpose and it just happened at a perfect time. I know that you did start your business back in 2017. Is that right?
Yes, yes, I did.
Okay.
Started it back in 2017. I was laid off in 2020. So that's when I just talked to my wife and said, hey, this is something that I want to do. Of course, being retired, I think you always have that drive to want to do something different and to want to help people and do things like that. So one of the things that the staffing industry allows me to do is to help people, especially veterans and spouses. So that was really one of my main driving forces was to get into staffing to help people do things like that. And I looked at different industries throughout the staffing industry as well. So one of the things I went with was I first went with HR, which was my wheelhouse, and I wasn't really doing any catching any traction at all. I was getting a lot of no's, a lot of people just not answering or just saying no. And so after that, I just said maybe I need to pivot a little bit And so I pivoted over to the IT section and into the government arena versus the private sector or commercial sector. And so once I did that, then I started getting some traction with staffing. And from there on, it's just history from that point forward.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you didn't take one niche per se, one industry. If that wasn't working out, you're like, okay, I need to make a pivot, and making that executive decision on your side to be able to make that change, I think speaks numbers to your leadership level and being able to kind of take messy action. I like to say, because some people they do get stuck, and they get stuck, and for you it would have been HR and like trying to make it work, and it could be a little discouraging, but you're like, nope, let's make a pivot. And you took a chance. And I think that's really great. I guess for the IT sector, what specifically, or I guess, how did you make the pivot actually? Like, how did you find the companies to work with? Did you source them somehow? Did you do in person events? What did that process look like for you?
It was a lot of emails being sent to a lot of different companies,
Yeah.
attending a lot of networking events virtually, because during the time when we were really trying to get up and running on the government side, COVID had hit. And so and it was probably a blessing in disguise because we was able to do a lot of virtual events. And so with those virtual events, I was able to make contact with a lot of big companies, prime companies, introduce myself, introduce our company, and so that's how that actually got started. Just me reaching out to a lot of different companies. And the way I did that was I would look up, because I'm sam.gov or whatever site that you're on, I would look at all of these solicitations, which I knew I did not have the capacity or the capital to really bid on these proposals or these solicitations, submit a proposal for these solicitations. So what I would do was I would take the pre-conference bidding Excel spreadsheet of the companies that was attending that of these solicitations that I knew I could fill. And I would reach out to each of one of these companies. And I was like, hey, this is my company. This is what we do. Here's our certification. Please give us a try. And, I would send out probably maybe, 40, 50 emails a day. And I did that for like 4 or 5 months, and then eventually we caught one company, you know, picked us up, let us do some sub work with them. And that kind of put us on a map a little bit. So after that, I submitted my own proposal, to the state of South Dakota as a prime vendor, and I won that contract. So that again kept me moving forward with performance, past performance, and things like that. So after that one, we reached out to more companies. We had the performance. We showing people what we can do, and companies was just picking us up right and left. So we've been pretty successful at that.
Yeah, that's so great. It's interesting how your journey has kind of transpired. It kind of has just all the doors have kind of been opening in your favor, which is really exciting. And the fact that you really started kicking off this business you mentioned during COVID, I'm just curious because you highlighted COVID as kind of being like a supporting something that supported you throughout the process. But just out of curiosity, as far as the industry goes, have you noticed any shifts from when you did start during COVID up until now?
Yes. When we first started and we was recruiting, there was a lot of at-home work. So, people were either hybrid or they were at home. And so, these IT professionals, they can basically almost write their own ticket. They can be like, hey, I'm not going into the office. I need to work from home. And so that was kind of, we kind of played to that, what they needed, and those are the positions that we really look to fill, was those remote positions, for the IT, arena. However, once COVID was over, the company was like, hey, you guys need to come back to work. And so it started creating a problem because after that, after 3 or 4 years, individuals in the IT field had become so used to working remotely. When I would call them and try to recruit them, I was like, hey, you may need to go into the office 2 or 3 days. And they were like, and so that was I'm not saying it was a problem, but it was something that I had to get over. Some IT professionals, they were like, yeah, sure, we'll go into the office. It's a hybrid situation, 2 days a week. We could do that. But at the beginning, as soon as COVID was over, there was a big like slowdown because of that. because those individuals was used to working remotely. And so when you're used to working from home, it's kind of hard to go back into the office because they're saving money. They're not spending money on gas, on lunch, and they get to spend time with their kids. They could take them to school, and so it was down.
Yeah, I can see I could see the slowdown there because that's when I shifted to remote working,
Yeah,
and I have never turned back ever since, and if I have ever applied for, a position and I'm like, I gotta go in," I'm like, "No, thanks, I'd rather find
right.
something that's remote." Are you finding that, there's still, I guess, right now, the industry, are they still looking for people that are is it primarily, like, in-person work, hybrid, or there's still a lot of remote positions available, are you finding?
It's a lot of in-person positions, but here's what happens. Once you recruit that individual and then you talk to you speak with them, you speak with the hiring manager, and then I may say, hey, this can be a hybrid or remote position, but you're going to have to go into the office to present yourself, and your capabilities. So they are secure enough with you working remotely, but you're going to have to spend some time in the office. And then a lot of my candidates, they don't mind doing that. I've even had candidates that we've had contracts where the companies would pay for these individuals to come and work for a week and then they'll send them back home. So, and that's another thing some of the people like. They like traveling. So, I had a person that was in North Carolina that took a job in Richmond. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I love it because, I have family in Richmond, so there's not a problem. Or the company reimbursed them with, travel per diem, hotels and things like that. So, you kind of have to, position yourself to, kind of like in the military, you have to learn to adapt.
Yeah.
And, once you adapt to that situation and that individual say, hey, this is what I would like to have. And then I would go back to my prime to say, hey, I have the perfect person, but here's what he wants, or here's what he or she wants. And they would either be like yes or no. And so most of the time it's been yes, so it's been pretty good for us.
Yeah, that's really great that they're, willing to work with the candidate. If they're a good candidate, why not?
Right, exactly.
So that's really great. Do you still support, I guess, right now within your business, are you still supporting like IT roles that you're trying to place? Or is it IT roles within government contracting or just government contracting? Like what does that look like, your ideal client right now?
So right now we're doing IT roles, and we do a few things outside of IT. We do administrative roles. We do non-medical roles, within the industry as well. You can't become you can't be focused on one particular role as for IT. You kind of have to find that sweet spot in each area, each arena. So within the medical field, I knew I couldn't fill doctors, CNAs, and things like that, but I could fill not CNA, well, nurse anesthesiologists, more or less professional type, but I could fall back on the administrative type on the medical field, you know, like X-ray techs, pharmacy techs, candidates like that. We could fill those roles. So you kind of have to find those sweet spots in each industry, and then you can go after that. You can't, pigeonhole yourself to say, I'm only going to fill IT positions, because IT professionals, they're hard to find, they're hard to fill. They can be, you can fill them, but they're just hard to find, those individuals, because in the staffing world, it's very competitive.
Hmm.
And
It
it's
is.
like first come, first serve. And if you don't come with your best offer to that individual, they're going to go to the next company, next staffing company. So you have to ensure that you are coming with your best offer right, as soon as you talk to them. And
Hmm.
so, one of the things I do when I speak with people, I say, hey, what is your expected pay rate for this position? I know what I have budgeted in my pricing. So if you tell me that you want, $40 an hour, and I have $50 an hour for you budgeted in my pricing, I can be like, hey, I can give you 45 an hour. Would that, make you make a decision to stay with Gateway? And they're like, of course. because not only, we offer, 401k, we offer benefits and things like that. It just depends on, how you go after those recruits, because it's hard really to get the right person in the right position. You have to present a good offer, and that's the key. You have to present a good offer.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so important is presenting that right fit offer for them because I mean, maybe you still experience this, but I know a lot of staffing agencies that they get ghosted. And I think, in my opinion, would be that initial call. Like, what didn't happen on that call to really intrigue the candidate and to really think like, okay, this is the one I want to go with, to the point that they did feel like they had to go and seek around other opportunities. Is there anything in particular that you do as part of your process, whether it's presenting that offer or your process itself, to really secure a candidate and get them excited about a position if you can place them?
Yeah, so I'm a people person. And so before we even start talking about the position, I just say, hey, what do you do? What do you like to do? I try to bring the walls down and build a relationship within the first 2 or 3 minutes. We may laugh. I try to find out some of their hobbies, where they're from, been in the military. I've traveled everywhere. So they may say, hey, I'm from, Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was like, what? I was stationed in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I loved it. We start talking about things like that. Then the next thing, we're laughing. So I was like, hey, let's get into this role that I would like to present to you. And then it's just from then on, it's like a friendly conversation. It's not, what are you looking for in this company? What are you doing? And stuff like that. It's more like, we sitting across from each other, having a cup of coffee, just having a conversation. And that's how I like to recruit, is just have a conversation.
Yeah, it's that relationship building aspect that we need to leverage and be mindful of, and that the other person just be human,
Yeah,
essentially. Be real, have a real conversation because the other person is real and they have real needs too. So I'm sure they're looking for something that doesn't seem very cookie cutter, too good to be true. They want like
right.
the real facts.
Exactly.
Yeah. Would you say that you have any, I mean, other than the relationship building on that, that first interaction, any other best practices for being ghosted?
Communication. Well, that's the key. And one of the things I do is I give all of my candidates have my number, my personal cell number, and they have my email. And I would say, hey, if there's anything that comes up, call me. If someone else approach you, you feel that, you may be getting a better offer, call me and let me know, because maybe we could work something out. Because I've already built that relationship. So I'm telling them, it's like, hey, here's my cell number. Call me if you need something, text me, whatever. And so that's one of the keys that I use too, is just lean on that personal relationship that you've built with them. If you don't communicate with them, they're gone. I mean, they are gone. And I learned that the hard way. Trust me, I learned that the hard way. So you have to kind of like, it- you have to be personable, because if you're not, they're gone.
Yeah, for sure. You need to build the know, like, and trust factor. They
Right,
know who you are, you build that rapport on the call. They tend to like you a little bit more. And now, because of that, now they're gonna trust you and they'll be more inclined to reach out to you directly if something else arises, to be like, either give you the benefit of the doubt, maybe you can make something else work for
right.
them, or just at least to let you know if it's a really great offer. So I think that's a really great tip, is keeping communication. Communication is key. Can you speak to a little bit of the government contracting? I had mentioned that I spoke to a different pair of ladies who are trying to get into government contracting, but how did you get into government contracting? Do you have any best practices for any of our listeners who might want to go that route?
Government contract is hard to get into. But one of the things that I found, more the role was a little bit more easier to get into, was I leaned into state or county, solicitations, which, they're still government, solicitations, they're just more local. And you're probably going to get more, especially when you're first starting out, you're probably going to get more success in leaning into like a state or a county or just a local contracts, because those contracts are not being put out as wide as the contracts on sam.gov. So when you're on sam.gov, and I would tell anyone that if you're a small company and you're on sam.gov and you're bidding on a solicitation, and it may be a set aside for a small business, those small businesses are like 10 million and under. So if you're not making $10 million or under, you're not going to win that solicitation. That's just facts. So what I would tell individuals to do, it's the same way I did, was just reach out to some of these larger prime companies because they're looking for companies, especially with different certifications with, my MBE, Minority Business Enterprise, or even my Service to Disabled Veteran Small Business certification. They're looking for companies like that to help them win proposals. And so they will help you. You can help them win a proposal by saying, hey, this is what we offer. This is, some of the pain points we can help you with. And that's another key point is, you have to be able to say, hey, here's a pain point, because you have to kind of do your research too. And you can be like, hey, I noticed that, you're having, difficulty recruiting this type of, role. This is what we do. We can recruit these roles. We have, in our back pocket, we have these individuals that's ready to go. So this is something that you kind of have to present to those those bigger companies if you're going on a federal level. State level is really, you just have to kind of almost do the same thing, but it's a lot more simpler, not a lot more easier because the state basically governs those contracts. So the budget that the state has, once you're with those big prime companies, they can say, okay, hey, we're going to bring Steve in. Steve is going to subcontract with us. He has these certifications. And also, as a small company, you can go after these state and local and county solicitations. One of my first contracts I won was with the state of South Dakota. And I won that without even having any type of experience in any type of winning any type of contract. And I was awarded as a prime on that contract. So that's what I mean by going after being specific and tactful about what you're going after. So I would always recommend going after state, local, and county solicitations before you even try to get to, SAM.gov and those huge contracts. Because if you're just starting out, you don't have the capacity, you don't have the capital, you're not going to win because these guys are coming in. Some of them are 8A certified, and they have the past performance, they have the capital, they have the capacity. So you're kind of like knocking your head up against a wall when you can just kind of pick the low level, the low hanging fruit, and still make $2-3 million. But you have to be specific about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really insightful. Would you say that your military background has helped you secure any contracts? Do they ever look at, or ask if that you're a veteran?
Uh, I Some of them do set asides for your services say professional small business. They do set asides for those. My military experience really helped me in this particular industry staffing because you have to be consistent and you have to be able to have, I call it the rhino skin. It has to be because people are going to say no, no, they're going to ghost you, they're not going to call you back. But you have to keep going, you have to keep trying. And so, but in order to actually get on a contract with the prime, you have to have that structure as a small business. But you have to have, applicant tracking system. You have to have the capability to provide medical, dental. You have to have all of those things in place because the prime is going to ask you that. Because when you go out and recruit for these prime companies, those individuals that you recruit are your contractors. They belong to you. So you actually have to be able to say, hey, we have a HR back office. We have the structure set up. All we need to do is just let us do what we do and we can make things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you speak to the veteran side of things a little bit and how you are supporting veterans right now and even other military spouses or veteran spouses?
Yeah, almost definitely. So, one of the things that we do is when I'm recruiting, especially for government type positions, and some like one prime I know I'm working with, they're connected with a company that gives veterans they can carry over their time. So if they come in as a contractor, that time that they spend in the military can count towards their retirement on the federal side. And so you have to look for individuals like that. Also, one of the things that I look for is like when I'm looking at contracts, I'm kind of specifically looking at contracts or solicitations that are near or around or base, be it Air Force, Navy, Marine, Army, because I know that if I get that contract, I can, help support those veterans and their spouses, even active duty with their spouses, you know, or their husband or wives. We spoke earlier how we move around so much that you really can't build up any type of longevity or career thing because you're moving around. So
Yeah.
that's why I always look for solicitations that are near or around a military base to help support those individuals.
That's such a great strategy because I know, when my husband was active duty and we went from Florida, we moved to California, and I was like, "What am I gonna do for work?" Like, I didn't know. I think I forgot what it was called, the website. You mentioned sam.gov, but the other one, I forgot what it's called.
Yeah,
USA.gov?
USA Jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, USA Jobs, I would go on there and I'm like, I don't know, these are like above my pay grade essentially. And it was hard to find something. And at the time it was before COVID, so there wasn't very many like remote positions. And it was either you get a position on base or try to learn the area and figure out how to get something off base. I ended up helping at the getting a job at the school on base just because my kids were in there and it was kind of easy for me. But just knowing how you currently support veterans and spouses as well is really inspiring because I know that it's hard. It's hard for both parties alike, especially even transitioning out of the military. And then it's like, okay, you have this really great skill set and you did your training and you got certifications and all of this stuff and you have credits in this skill set, but then how does that translate when you come out of the military? Did you find that
Exactly.
to be hard?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that I look at is because I was kind of strategic about when I went in. When I went into the Air Force, I went in as an admin, but I was like, this is not gonna pay me once I decide to get out. And so that's when I, moved over to, cross trained over into paralegal. And so I knew that that would, give me, a kind of a head start once I got out. So it translated from military to civilian. But a lot of individuals that work and, that has these AFSCs or that's Air Force, but I don't
Yeah,
know the Navy and
those
Army
the
things.
jobs.
But, when you have those military jobs, it's like, I was a battalion commander or I was a battalion sergeant or whatever. So drove tanks. We did this. And I was like, man, you have a very wide, vocabulary of being a leader. And so you have to tailor your resume to that position. And I know they teach them that in TAPS, how to try to transition from the military over to the civilian side. But it's not only the job, it's just the environment. Because I had a hard time going from the military to the civilian side. And it took me almost 2 years to really get kind of comfortable with corporate America because it's a totally different animal from being in the military than going to corporate America. And I just felt it was no camaraderie and it was just different because everybody was 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 5 o'clock, you never see them again. You see them the next day. Military, we could get together, we hang out, we do things together as a
Mhm.
so it was a hard transition, and some people could transition, easier than others. I just happened to be enlisted, which was kind of hard transitions. A lot of officers may have it a little easier because they're already in that environment. So
Yeah.
I don't knock them. Hey, it is what it is. It's just a hard transition sometimes for some people.
Yeah. Just curious for any veterans that might be listening. When let's say you get a veteran that comes to you and they had this great skill set inside when they were active duty and now they want to transition out and they don't know what industry to go into. Do you have a process for that? I know you mentioned about like tailoring a resume, but how can you support somebody like that with next steps?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do, um, I review all my resumes. So when they come in and I see they have military experience and I may have a role over here and they have experience in the military, they just don't know how to connect the dots. And so I would call them, be like, hey, this is the position that I think you would be really good at. Let's just talk it through and see if this is something that you really, would like to do or if it's really within your skill set. And a lot of times they they master it. They don't know how to connect the dots. And so yeah, one of the things I do review all my resumes. I do not That's the one thing I don't do with AI. I do not use AI for, reviewing resumes. I'm going back to the old school. I review all my resumes because I don't want to miss anything. And I want to make sure I get the right person for the right position.
Absolutely. And I think that's really helpful for anybody who is a veteran who needs to be placed. You're a great resource to have. And just to know that I mean, obviously, I like AI. I know a lot of agencies are using AI for like sourcing or their ATS systems. So I value and I can see the value in you not using it because of that main reason that somebody can't keyword search. A lot of people might get lost because they don't have those keywords, but they have the innate ability to perform the skills that are needed, even if it's not on the resume. So I think that's really great. Would you mind chatting a little bit about business development? You mentioned AI. So are you using any AI in your business? What does that process look
Oh
like?
yes, almost almost definitely. If you're not using AI, you're way behind.
Some are.
So yeah, I use AI a lot, you know, for creating proposals, doing executive summaries and things like that. So I definitely use AI, but it has its place. You have to know when to use it and when not to use it. And even when you're using AI, you still have to go in and kind of get a little bit to make it your own. You just can't put a solicitation in there, your capability statement, like create a proposal.
Right.
It will. I've seen it done. And then some people may say, create a proposal. They'll put it together and send it in, but they haven't tailored it. You have to tailor it. You just can't take that one little thing and be like, okay, AI's done all my work for me that normally takes 3 or 4 days. They've done it in like 10 minutes.
Hmm.
And so, but you still have to go back and do some homework. You got to do your research. You're going to have to add some things. You're going to have to edit some things. And the one thing AI can help you with, or I would not depend on AI helping me with, is pricing. And so that's something that we still do manually.
Definitely. You said pricing,
Yes.
and that's pricing your services. Is that what you're saying, like retainers?
Yes. So within the staffing, you have different margins. I mean, you could put in there, we want these margins, but here's the deal. Each position has different margins. And so if you're bidding on 15 or 20 positions, you may have 10 in IT position, you may have 5 in admin. So your margins are going to be different. You could probably put it in AI. It may generate some things for you. But one of the things I found helpful is if you do it yourself, if the procurement officer calls you, how to present it to him because you've created it. So when he walks you through that, be like, hey, because we just submitted a proposal, a couple of my partners, and the first thing he said, are these true numbers? And we was like, yes, they're true numbers because we knew them. So if you call us in, be like, hey, can we go over these numbers and margins? I'd be like, yeah, sure, let's go.
Yeah, and not something that was made up by AI and not be legit, or maybe it was like an general industry standard, but it wasn't specific to your business. So, oh gosh, that would be really embarrassing to say the least.
Exactly. I mean, if they call you in and or you've had AI create this thing for you, and then you're like, "Well, this is what we think," but you talk to a procurement officer, they don't have time. They want to know and because they're making a decision based on your interview right then and there.
Yeah, definitely. Can you share a little bit about what's working really well right now for Gateway?
Right now, are we are pursuing some major contracts with Gateway, being that our performance standards have met and exceeded with all of our prime companies now. So we're kind of like stepping out and going to start playing per se with the big boys. Well, I have some partners with VIP Global Solutions and Lee Cinco LLC. They're small business companies as well, and they're veterans as well, and so we're partnered up. We just submitted a proposal for a VA contract, which is a really large contract. So hopefully we'll get that. We're pursuing some other contracts with I think we have the city of Charlotte that we're trying to, we're pursuing. So we have a lot of contracts that we're pursuing right now. So, our business development, we stay busy. We're always looking for the right one solicitation to submit a proposal for. There are a lot of solicitations out there, but you have to pick the one that you feel comfortable with that's, within your wheelhouse and within your scope of work.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important to know, staying in your wheelhouse,
Yeah.
not trying to go outside of that scope of work because then things could get a little messy.
Oh, yeah.
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 For
Cause
you,
I've had some companies reach out to me and they would call me, their business development guys would call me and say, "Hey, can you recruit for this type of industry?" And I'm like, "No." But if I know somebody that does, I was like, "Hey, maybe you want to call this person." I do not have any issue with referring business to another company. So especially, a veteran company. I don't have any problems doing that because if it's not in my wheelhouse, if I can't do it, I just can't do it. And if I'm greedy and be like, I can do it, and then I don't perform, then that's going to look bad on my resume, on my company resume, which I do not want.
yeah, absolutely. And I know that you mentioned about having partners. Are those partners internally, or is that just part of like an ecosystem type of referral based, or how are you leveraging partnerships right now?
No, actually, we met Dr. Stephen Lee and Victor Garden met well, I know me and Victor met a VIP Global Solutions. He saw one of my post podcasts. He called me. We got to know each other. We're on the same wavelength. We want the same thing. So we partnered together. And then with Dr. Stephen Lee, I met him. I can't remember how I met him. Well, I met him through a friend of mine. Me and her were stationed together. That's her cousin. She introduced me to him. He has a company. And so we all three kind of got together and we just said, hey, let's put our, companies together. Let's, team up and let's try to go after some of these big contracts. And so, with that being said, is that they're all retired military. They're both retired military. And, within the military, there has to be some integrity involved, within that community. And so I feel that I can trust them and I hope hopefully they can trust me. And we all go after the same thing. We focus on something and we'll be like, hey, let's team up and let's go after this contract. Because if we all team up together, we can go after some bigger contracts versus they picking one little small contract, I'm picking a small contract, he's picking a small contract. If we take all of our past performance, all of our capabilities and bandwidth, then we can go after some of these larger contracts. And so that's how the partnership formed, just kind of mutual. We just kind of met each other, we were on the same path and we trust each other. And, they're retired, like I said, they're retired military. So that we have that in common.
Yeah, definitely. For anybody who wants to be able to leverage partnerships, maybe they're a solopreneur right now and they've been doing it by themselves since the beginning. Is there any insights or any recommendations, tips as to how, somebody else could find a partnership that kind of like what you're doing now?
A partnership is almost like a job interview. When you're looking to partner with someone, they're interviewing you and you're interviewing them. And they want to make sure that if they partner with you, you're going to be able to fulfill your portion of that contract, of that proposal. And so, that's the biggest thing is just finding someone that fits, with you and your company and you know, what you're looking to do within the next, 5 to 10 years. So some companies are ready to do that. Some companies are not. I've been, pretty blessed to run into some really good prime companies that, a couple of have taken me under their wing and have taught me some things. That's the only thing I could, really, you just have to kind of like, it's like a job interview, because your job, your capability statement is your company's resume. So when you present your resume to a prime company, they're looking at it and they'll be like, hey, this company may be a good fit for us. And so when you get that opportunity to present your company to that, big company or that prime company, you have to make sure you have your P's and Q's together because they're going to ask you questions, because these guys are making 40, $50 million a year. And so if they're going to bring you on as a subcontractor, they want to ensure that you're going to be able to perform the task orders that they assign to you. And so that's the biggest key.
Yeah, definitely. That's really great insights because I'm sure there's a lot of other agencies, a lot of business owners that, having a partner, hey, that sounds appealing, but how do I find this person? And like how you said, it's like an interview, You're trying to see if you're a good fit, and that you can actually do business together
Yeah,
um in a
it's
sustainable
just like,
way.
the solicitations, once you see a solicitation, each one of those RFPs has like I said, a pre-conference meeting. And so during that pre-conference, each one of those prime companies sign in. And so what I did was I looked at the Excel spreadsheet. I went down, it may be, 50, 75 companies that attended that meeting. I sent emails to each one of those introducing my company. You may only get 5 or 10 responses back, but then out of the 5 or 10, you may only get 2 or 3 that really sit down and talk with you. But that's
Hmm.
something that you have to do, like we just said. It's like applying for a job. When you sit down, you apply for like 15, 20 jobs a day. Why not do that for your company? That's all it is.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that insight.
Yeah.
Are there any pressing challenges right now that are keeping you? I know that your goal is to land some of these bigger contracts, but are there any pressing challenges right now that are keeping you from, landing any bigger contracts or growing your business?
Time. You have to be very patient with these solicitations. The only other thing is that, like I said, we're trying to move into a space with bigger, contracts. So we have to be mindful of, which contracts or solicitations that we're going after. Being that, we may have some past performance, we may have the capacity, but some of these other companies have a brand name, and some of them are incumbents. And so those are really some of the hardest things that I've found within this industry is that when you're trying to compete with an incumbent and they've been there for 5 years and they're gonna rebid again for the next solicitation, that could be a problem. Because especially if they perform well, then it's like, man, I'm not should I even, spend time waste my time? Am I wasting my time or should I spend time? Or because you could do that research, on the incumbents and if they're performing well, that's gonna be an issue.
Yeah. How would you say that you could actually like build your brand to that capacity so that you then have, the same leverage as they would, other than time in the game?
That's it. You just have to have the time in the game. I mean, you can, with AI, you can say, hey, we could build a resume and say, hey, we have a robust recruiting system. We have an outstanding back office. We take care of our contractors. So we ensure that we only, present to you well qualified resumes or candidates for these positions. And so, once you get that, then I think, that kind of helps build your brand name.
Hmm.
Before I even started receiving contracts, I was doing work for free. And my wife was like, I can't believe you're doing that. And I was like, hey, this is gonna help me. And I would help companies find resumes, find candidates to submit with their proposals for, government contractors in the IT space. And I did it for free. But what happened is that once I said, hey, I want to go out to my own solicitation, I reached back out to those companies and I was like, hey, could you guys write me a past performance on, what I, helped you guys do? And these guys was like, hey, Gateway is an outstanding recruiting company. They have a great, 24, 48-hour turnover rate for you. They can get these candidates for you. I used to have companies call me on a Sunday and be like, hey, we need these resumes in by Tuesday. So that's how hard you have to work. And I did all that for free for like about 2 years. That's that sweat equity you have to put in.
Yeah, you just went in for it, you just took chances. You
Yeah,
just did your part, to get the recognition, to just get your foot out there. Get out there, be seen. I
yep,
think that's really great.
exactly.
Where do you see Gateway Integrated Solutions in the next 6 to 12 months?
Think we'll be we're pretty successful now. I think within the next 6 to 12 months, we will have a major contract under our belt. So um, I know the VA contract is north of probably 120 million. So, those are the type of things that we're looking at right now pursuing. We have a couple of other contracts with City of Charlotte. So I think we'll be our company is pretty small now. Actually, it's very small. It's just me and my brother. But, with AI, I need a lot of people. But, within the 6 to 12 months, I think we will be able to bring on probably about another 3 or 4 recruiters, which would lend me more time to do more business development. So yeah, so I think we're looking good. Everything is looking good. I know, one of the things that we really talk about is being the layoffs up in DC and the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area.
Mhm.
And a lot of those companies or agencies that laid those individuals off are now looking to rehire individuals to come in to replace those one that they either laid off or they forced them into early retirement. And so
Yeah.
that's another, arena that we're looking into in that, the DMV area. So we're also looking into Huntsville, Alabama, the Redstone. A lot of people really don't know Huntsville, Alabama is probably like the second largest DOD employer in the United States.
Oh,
And people be like,
Alabama?
Huntsville, Alabama. I was like, yes, Huntsville, Alabama. It is one of the largest, probably the second other outside of, the DMV area. Huntsville is probably the second largest DOD employer. And so
Interesting.
we're definitely looking to get more, contracts down in that area as well.
Yeah, definitely. I know you can do it. Sky's the limit
Yeah.
for you.
Oh, yeah, we're going to do it.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I thank you for sharing your journey and your insights with me and with the audience, especially around how you're supporting veterans and navigating the government contracting world. Before we wrap up, would you mind sharing where our listeners can connect with you?
Sure. My email is Steve.Dixie at GIS, the number 4.tech. And you can email me anytime. And my
Perfect.
website is www.g.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This was a really great conversation. I appreciate you being here, and I'm excited to share this conversation with our listeners. It was so
Yes,
nice to
thank
have
you for
you.
taking the time and thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed our conversation as well.
Absolutely.